Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you, hopefully, ideas on what Unending Swarm could develop into. A lot of Tyranids players would tell you that this is our worst detachment. I don't hold the same sentiment, but at the same time, I agree, it could use a touch up. Now, I have hope that it might, but not a lot of it. In the just scheme of things, there is a chance that Unending Swarm receives a buff, but in a bit we'll talk about all the things as to why it might not get that before the end of the edition goes out. So, Unending Swarm, what does it do for a detachment rule? Each time an enemy unit is selected to shoot, after that unit has finished making its attacks, if one or more models from one or more Endless Multitude units from your army were destroyed as a result of those attacks, each such unit can make a surge move. To do so, roll 1d6. That unit can be moved a distance in inches up to the result, but that unit must end that move as close as possible to the closest enemy unit, excluding aircraft. When doing so, those models can be moved within engagement range of enemy units. A unit cannot make a surge move while it is battle shocked. Alright. You can also only make a surge move once per phase. That's in the uh, FAQ, balance status late, one of them, right? So, Unending Swarm. Now, why. I've already made a video about why I think it is still a bit more viable, but in the grand scheme of things, most people don't. And if more people have a feeling that it isn't worth it, let's see what could be for people to actually play it. The thing with Unending Swarm is it came at a time with, well, Swarm on the mind. And I think GW has signs that they're not doing it again. And those signs get stronger and stronger. So Unending Swarm got hit, Green Tide has been hit, Skitarii Hunter Cohort has been hit, Crude Hunting Pack has been hit. All of these are an instance of what if you take a lot of a little, right? Green Tide, surprisingly, hasn't been nearly as unnerfed as Orc players would feel that it should be. Skitarii Hunter Cohort, well, they would like to still have AdMech in the edition, so you can't nerf their best and probably only detachment, leave it up to some. We will get to another one. And they clearly didn't want Crude Hunting Pack to exist any longer. Why do I say that? Well, all of these have received upgrades, but not to their own detachment. They released a second detachment that basically is building on the idea of the first. So for Unending Swarm, we then get Warrior Bioform Onslaught. For Orc's Green Tide, we then get Tactical Brigade. And you might be wondering, what do you mean by these being upgrades? Before, this one is probably the most confusing as to why I say that, but let's go back. Warrior Bioform Onslaught says you can make Warriors Battle Line, and if you interact with Battle Line, or our Endless Multitude, excuse me, you might get some benefits. So we're not going to fix the one that already had you bringing the Endless Multitude units. No. How about we give you a second place to put them? Kind of. We're going to say that you put them over here, but they really don't do jack shit over here. Just so hopefully you forget about Unending Swarm, please. And then we go over to Orcs. Why on earth would I call this another Swarm list? Well, consider what gets the most benefits in this list, in this detachment. Infantry and mounted. So, if you take a lot of infantry, because let's be real, you're probably not taking the mounted, what what do you get? You get a list that is looking kind of like a tide of multiple infantry bodies. Now, mind you, you could argue that armies that are mostly infantry aren't necessarily that much of a tide. But at the same time, I would then argue this is asking you to use a lot of those infantry, right? You wouldn't call Votan tied because there's like 8 models and there's only 2 that are vehicles. One is mounted, right? So would be plain Votan be a tie? No, because they're expensive. Well, what's another thing? Would Space Marines be a tide? Well, depending on what it is. But orcs aren't expensive. That's one of their main things. They're not expensive, so if you take a lot of inexpensive infantry, congratulations, we have what I would argue is a tide. Now, Tactical Brigade definitely has other builds. You see trucks and flaskets and the shock attack gun coming out with um, tank busters and breaker boys, all types of infantry, because that's what gets buffed here. Now, you could argue that bully boys, by that logic, would fall under tide. I'd argue elite infantry tide, still a tide, because you're going for a stat check, and that's what tides are. Um, Pretty much anything that orcs want to do does result in a little bit of tide. So I'm just saying, Tactical Brigade does seem like an upgrade to me as to what they did with Green Tide, except what if we benefited more infantry? Because I can't just say boys again. Oh, wait, what's that? Tactical Brigade does give you more battle line for you to possibly bring out? Ah, Storm Boys. Yeah, so a different flavor of boys is battle line once more. So that's my argument for Tactical Brigade. Skitari Hunter Cohort, Halo Street Battleclade. Now, you can't necessarily argue that this is a tide unless we're talking about the same thing I just said about orcs. Into which, because the army is inexpensive and you need a lot of bodies, it's a bit of a tide. Now, this does give you the play around of including vehicles and vehicle like things to get benefits, right? It doesn't restrict you just to infantry. But then we have a we have a stratagem that works just on the Scorpius Dune Rider and the things that get out of it, i.e. infantry. We have another stratagem that it says, hi, here's your infantry. And the more you play this detachment, you realize, yeah, it's probably wanting you to include more infantry. So, while it might not be true tide and a 1-to-1, I'd argue this was designed to be a bit of an upgrade to this. And then we go to Crude Hunting Pack, probably the most egregious example of what I mean. Yeah, Auxiliary Cadre, they were like, hey, we're not going to fix Crew and auxiliaries in that one detachment because we don't want you bringing more crew. What we will do is finally do the thing that makes sense, into which your auxiliaries play with your army. Eh? And the Tau players went, damn, so 2 of my 5 detachments are auxiliary focused? And GW said, yes, have fun with it. So, this one is a straight up supposed to be upgrade. They realized, yeah, we're not going to let you spam units again because we don't know how to balance that. So, that goes to say, I don't have much faith that the base version of these will see any improvements by the time the edition ends. But if Unending Swarm were to be a lucky example as that, yes, you can still be buffed even though I clearly don't want you to exist. Yes, it can happen. What would GW do? Well, for that, I went to look over to a couple of different things, and there's different reasons, okay? So, Unending Swarm focuses you on using surge moves, right? What is something that came out that uses surge moves? Blood Legion. Oh, bam, almost 1-to-1, right? Now, instead of being shot, it is your enemy moves within your danger zone, and then you surge at them, right? Cool. Um, this one is arguably worse than ours on Unending Swarm, but that's because Corn. I don't know. Um, truly though, they're they I I have I have a theory. All right, I'll sneak this in here because I decided not to make the video. I have a theory that they are rolling things in together because they want things to have the detachment rule for demons into the aligned legions, but they're going to do it the way that they have done with the Drukari and the Eldari book. So, there's that. And then beyond their surge move, they got something else because GW learned, well, surge moves just aren't enough. They have blood tainted. Into which, well, you get sticky objectives one way or another. Now, here's the thing about that. Would I assume that GW would match Surge bonus detachment rule to Surge bonus detachment rule? No, because they really don't want Battle Line to be the main thing, except for, I argued they probably do in Blood Legion. However, if they let the players figure that out, instead of explicitly saying it, it's different. So I can't necessarily see them giving us Sticky to fix Unending Swarm, because that would free up the entire thing that Unending Swarm wanted to do, which is control objectives and touch things. That's pretty much it. You want to jam up the board, and giving a bunch of battle line that ease of access to doing it, probably not their go-to. So, while Blood Legion is pretty close to what might be argued, I can't see it happening. Then we go on to another example as to Annihilation Legion. This has a reason for being here. They initially had it so that each time a destroyer code or flayed one's unit from your army declares a charge, you can reroll the charge, and if the target of the charge is below half strength, +1 to the charge roll. And the reason that this is here into my discussion is because they realized it fucks over the other half of the keyworded units for the detachment. So for Destroyer Cult, this was fine for the Flayed Ones and the Scorpex and the Ophidian Destroyers, but it was absolutely worthless for the Hexmark Destroyer, the Locust Destroyers too, right? Locust Lord, whatever, right? So they added, each time a Destroyer Cult unit from your army makes a ranged attack that targets the closest eligible target, add 1 to the AP characteristic of that attack. Again, this would be nice because over here in Tyranids, we are lacking AP. But if I'm being honest, I can't see them giving us AP for Unending Swarm before anything else. Why? Because that's a lot of volume of attacks, and, well, thanks to Hive Tyrant and Turvy, there's a chance for those to be lethal, which might be a little bit too lethal when we have sustained crits on 5s. I can't see them doing that either. And why is that my argument for this? Well, for Endless Multitude, why did I say multitude? Endless Multitude, we have Gargoyles, Hormagaunts, Termagants, and Neurogaunts. 2 of them are melee, 2 of them are ranged. Gargoyles, technically, I guess you could make the argument that since they have the same amount of hits or attacks in melee as they do ranged, I guess technically you could say it's both. But primarily, right, their better thing is on shooting, and same with the Termagants. The Hormagaunts and Uragants are better in melee. Backlash only have melee. So I would like to see them take a route where they realize, hey, 2 of these units don't really want to be surging. Now, counterpoint, Termagants do have access to pistol, or, well, spine fist, which are pistol weapons, with assault, right? So you could argue that if you model for that, yeah, I can't see why not. Counterpoint, though, 2 units shouldn't have to rely on specifically modding for 1 weapon. Gargoyles don't have access to it, And Termagants, yeah, I that's not too friendly. Okay, I would like to use my other weapons when they can take special weapons. So while Strength 5 is better on the flesh board here for gargoyles, it's still one attack. And you don't want to turn everything into a damage unit, so I can see why they would pass on that as well. But Termagants have access to some cool things, so it'd be kind of remiss that you just get stuck with, hey, Spinefist or bust, right? So then, going on from what they could do from Annihilation Legion, let's talk about something else that would possibly play into the rule and possibly play into the lore. So, I looked at Lions Blade Task Force. You might be wondering, how the fuck is this even remotely close? Well, we don't have like desperate escape tests in Tyranids. We also don't have. Well, I'll put this here because I had this. No, I'll save it. I'll save that because I guess it could tie into another one. But Lions Blade Task Force, you get the opportunity to trigger desperate escape test when an enemy unit within engagement range of a Raven Wing unit tries to fall back. Right, -1 if they're battle shocked. Oh wait, we're Tyranids. We like to imagine we can do that consistently. Might as well, right? Each time a Deathwing unit from your army declares a charge, if one or more units of that charge are within engagement range of one or more Ravenwing units from your army, add 2 to the charge roll. This would be neat if this was instilled for the Unending Swarm, because their whole thing is attacking en masse to make up for the comparative frailty with sheer numbers. So, coupled with the speed and ferocity of their onslaught, which only seems to increase as the prey tries to gun down the creatures or drive them back, good luck when you try to get away from them once I've already touched you. I feel like triggering desperate escape tests would be really cool. Now, would that be busted? I highly doubt it, if I'm being quite honest. But that's because you are getting trapped in the swarm. I would really love that idea of, alright, Hormagaunts and Gargoyles, your time to shine, go tie them up. And then here comes the Neurogons after that, keep them tied up, block out whatever. And Termagants, hey, get ready for your turn after that as well. Have some little firing range before your Hormagaunts get to make contact, whatever it may be. I think it could be a really sick idea. So, if I was in GW for a day, right, and they were like, hey, you have one shot to fix Unending Swarm, what would you do? I would really like Desperate Escape Test because that is what's happening. You are desperately trying to escape from the onslaught, the barrage of gribblies. And then I'd probably play it myself, even though I really don't like playing with that many models, right? To the second part of add 2 to the charge roll, this is where I start to tie into the next one. Final day. Final day, if your Tyranids are visible and within 9 inches to some other shit, yada yada yada. I'm sorry, 6 inches to an enemy unit. GSC shooting that enemy unit gets +1 to hit. The other thing that I realized about the evolution of the swarm, per se, list before we got to their upgrades, their digivolutions, is that they had a buff or a debuff specifically, right? Yeah, there's more durability here, and there was durability here in the sense that it was annoying as fuck, right? But getting past those, even though I know this was before orcs, right? Right. Um, I say this in the sense that we're still seeing this, so putting it over here. The ones that work, I should say, not the evolution, more so the ones that we've seen work, still, and the best, is that you either had a really busted unit, or you had debuffs, right? Stealth and benefit of cover, or +1 to hit, +1 to wound. I also, speaking about Crew Hunting Pack for a second, well, I guess not this, I was wondering if Unending Swarm and Crusher Stampede should have switched their detachment rule, because it just would make more sense. Into, oh, you pissed off the swarm, so now like the little gribblies are like really angry and like +1 to hit, possibly +1 to wound if you get through enough of them. They're like turning up the jets, and then like the Crusher Stampede, it's okay. I need my monsters to stampede, so a surge move is closer to a stampede. But alas, you run into the same issue as well. Then my Exocrine wouldn't want to surge. My Maliceptor, yes and no, right? My Tyranids wouldn't want to surge. The Norns probably would. But, that's just to say, in Crew Hunting Pack, I noticed that you get Crusher Stampede and Green Tide right here to form the rules of what should be your Swarm detachment. So, it could be nice. But going from there, something like Final Day would be nice. And probably instead of +1 to hit, I propose reroll hits. Reroll hits. That way, the melee actually has something that can possibly be done in combination with this. Now, don't get me wrong. +1 to hit for Hormigons, making them hit on 3s would be nice. And then you still have access to just about that, right? But we're lacking on things to do in melee over here in Tyranids, even though a lot of our rules say, hey, do this in melee. But then our data sheets don't say, they say, hey, you stay the fuck away from melee, basically. So something like benefiting the Hormigons into giving them access to rerolls, because the rerolls, you go, but then you wouldn't need an Exocrine, and that's exactly what I'm trying to free up. I don't like that all of our detachments, you go, oh, look at the Tyranids Codex, it gets to do so many things, oh my gosh. And then everybody's just like, okay, so start with Hive Tyrant, 3 Exocrines, 2 Tyrannifexes, call it a day. Like, I don't think I don't really like that part, so I want to free up that aspect of the Codex where, can I please let go of the fucking Exocrine? You all hate getting shot by it. I hate having to use it because we have no other gun or access to rerolls. That would be fucking nice. So, Unending Swarm, if you could reroll into the crits and the lethals and the sustained, that would be pretty fucking cool. I don't necessarily need too many hits when it's not likely I'm not going to get the wounds. But that's just my proposal. Now, another thing that I did think about is that Flyblown Host is an infantry detachment for Death Guard, and bogging people down could make them a little softer. So I did think about -1 toughness with an engagement range or whatever. But yeah, probably not. That's probably too close to doing what Death Guard want to do. And then people would get upsetty spaghetti. So Death Guard can have that. I'm just saying the little gribblies should have a little bit more to work with than surging and calling it a day, because I have no access to rerolls to proc, sustain, crits on 5s, the lethals from Hive Tyrant / Turfy, right? Or the sustain from putting a Winged Tyranid Prime on my gargoyles. It would be nice if it was rerolls involved somehow, some way. And that was a roundabout way to just say, for Final Day, it gave me the interesting idea of what if it's an aura that procs go time, right? An aura that just procs fucking go time. So, there's that. And going to the rerolls, I also have Hearthband, into which I'm still sorry, Votan, but mathematically it's better. I'm sorry. And mathematically, you should be winning more with this detachment than Oathman. Because the math of this checks out more. Especially when you have Grim Efficiency. But this isn't about Votan. This is about Unending Swarm. So what from Hearthband would I like? Yeah, both of these. both of these. I would want the reroll hit rolls of 1 and the AP. I would. Right? But here's the other thing that Hearthband has that they're not using, and I can't blame them for this one. That I realize we don't have in our entire codex, right? Pretty sure I double checked this one. They have a funny little thing down here, Fury of the Hearth, into which their non-blast weapons get rapid fire 1. So we don't have that, and it would seem pretty par for the course if Unending Swarm had your ranged weapons get access to rapid fire. That way, you have a bunch of tiny fucking shots going off that could possibly be sustained, crits on 5s, so on and so forth. I think rapid fire would be perfect here, and that at least makes me feel better about how 2 of these units are better in range than they are in melee, when the detachment rule is asking me for something for melee. You see how that comes back to what I meant over here on Annihilation Legion? Yeah. That's what I propose, because I can't see them giving us more something like Blood Legion. I would hope that it's a fix in line with something like Annihilation Legion, where, hey, half of my units don't really want to do that too much. I mean, it's nice, but can I have something for when they aren't doing that first part? I would like to see Desperate Escape Test, because that's pretty fucking neato. That's a underutilized ability that they said, hey, we'll run it back with Lions Blade Task Force, and it just seems fucking on theme. But if there's no Desperate Escape Test, I will settle for proccing an aura of reroll hit rolls of 1, and then possibly giving them rapid fire. I know that sounds like a lot, but either or, I guess. Either or. Right? Maybe increase the attacks characteristic. Let's make this easier on ourselves. Instead of fucking saying rapid fire, how about when they are around enemies, you increase the amount of attacks? Something like that, because we also don't have too much attack manipulation in this Tyranids Codex. So yeah. My number 1, hopefully Desperate Escape Test. Also, the other thing about this is speaking to the larger Tyranids builds things right now. We need to be faster for the current metagame. So being in one of our fastest detachments, you go, but Vanguard Onslaught, and I'm like, yeah, okay, that too. But Unending Swarm has a surge move, so over here. This would be nice if our speed did something besides just touch something and hope that Overwatch only hurt slightly, right? So that's what I think could happen. That's what I kind of want to happen. And yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment for me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.